For decades now, Palestinians have been saying that Israel's occupation of the West Bank is illegal, as are its settlements. That the Gaza Strip, despite the Israeli disengagement of 2005, is still occupied under international law. That the occupation should be ended ASAP. And that Israel's discriminatory policies in the occupied Palestinian territories amount to a form of racial segregation and apartheid. But they were ignored. They weren't taken seriously by the international community. On Friday, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, though, issued a landmark 83-page opinion agreeing with the Palestinians on each and every one of those points. The court overwhelmingly condemned Israel's actions, finding the continued occupation of Palestinian territories, including Gaza, illegal, demanding the end of that occupation as rapidly as possible, and even calling for reparations to be paid to Palestinians who have lost their land. Now, this ICJ opinion is an advisory opinion. It can't be enforced, but it does have legal and moral weight. It can influence the foreign policy of UN member states. The question is, will it affect America's foreign policy or Britain's? Will Western countries, which pretend to care about international law when they're talking about Russia or Iran, pay any attention to this damning ruling from the world's highest court? Rula Jebreal is an award-winning Palestinian-Italian journalist, author and foreign policy analyst. She's also, I'm delighted to say, a Zeteo contributor. And she joins me now. Rula, thanks so much for coming on the show. Will the world, will the West, will the US, the UK, will they pay any attention to this ICJ ruling?
They should, if they care about international legality, if they care about universal values, if they care about rule-based international order, if they care about sending a message to the world that they stand with democracy, that they want to defend the principle of democracy, universality of human rights and human lives, if they really care about these issues. But if they want to create an exception to those rules, to these laws, then they should give the exception to Israel, which by turn will be used by every autocrat,
yes,
every dictator to see, well, if Israel can get away with illegal occupation, annexation, bombing schools, war crimes, crimes against humanity, then we will do it as well. They are, by
yes,
doing so, obliterating the infrastructure of international legality.
Yeah, if I was Bashar al-Assad, I'd be demanding an apology right now from the West. How about the European Union? The EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell has been pretty critical of Israel's actions in Gaza. Do you think the EU might be a place where the ICJ ruling is better received?
Look, Mehdi, a year ago, with a delegation of Palestinians, Israelis, and Americans, former diplomats, former peace negotiators, we went and we met with officials from the European Union, including vice presidents, including people who are working with Borrell. And we were told, we actually went on May 2023 and begged them, pled with them to do something about the Israel-Palestinian question before it's too late. And the answer, well, we leave it to the United States and for Palestinians and Israelis to negotiate and reach an agreement. Well, the International Court of Justice is now saying what Israel is doing is illegal, is criminal, and the international community, the world, Europeans and others have to sanction Israel and force them to end their unlawful, illegal military occupation. Let's see if they would sanction Israel the way they sanctioned Putin and Russia.
Yes.
I fear that the double standard and the hypocrisy will continue. I just saw this morning that the president of Israel will be participating at the Paris Olympic. Well, the guy was mentioned, Herzog was mentioned in the International Court of Justice for his infamous quote where he said there's no innocent civilians in Gaza, and thus they're all our illegitimate target.
Yeah, of course, Herzog said all that and then backtracked and said, but I also said, you know, we shouldn't attack civilians, even though I said everyone is responsible. Yeah. Rula, we were told for many years not to say the A word, apartheid, in relation to Israel, that it's unfounded, it's unfair, it's anti-Semitic. And yet, while the ICJ in its ruling doesn't specifically accuse Israel of apartheid, it does say that Israel has been since 1967 in violation of the prohibition on racial segregation and apartheid established by the UN Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. That is pretty damning, is it not?
Absolutely. Mehdi, in 2018, Israel passed a law, the nation-state law, which says, which basically, it's a Jewish supremacist law. between the river and the Mediterranean Sea, there will only be Jewish supremacists. Last Friday, Israel passed another law that there will never be a Palestinian state. They voted against the two-state solution. And the reaction of Prime Minister Netanyahu to the ruling of the ICJ, he went out and said, we cannot occupy our own land. He considered Palestinian territories Israeli property, which the International Court of Justice, which is the highest court in the world,
yes,
the ultimate and final arbiter of international legality, said this is illegal. In defiance of the ruling, they approved more settlements. They are consolidating the occupation. They're carrying ethnic cleansing in Gaza and East Jerusalem and the West Bank, telling the world that they will continue. It will be apartheid today, tomorrow, and forever, and military occupation forever. You know, I find it shameful that after all of this, he will be received tomorrow at Congress, where people will be applauding, the same people who have been lecturing the world about democracy, Western democratic values, that they say they want to defend democracy at home and overseas. How can you, with straight face, say these things and then you receive the man who wants to enshrine and continue to implement an ethno-state of purity, racial purity, and segregation?
So you mentioned Netanyahu's response to the ICJ ruling. His national security minister, the far-right politician Itamar Ben-Gvir, accused the ICJ of being an anti-Semitic court. Do you think that knee-jerk charge of anti-Semitism from Israeli officials even works anymore?
I don't think so. Actually, it undermines the real fight against anti-Semites. People who, like in Charlottesville, chanted, Jews will not replace us, blood and soil. You and I condemn these real anti-Semites, the people who dine and wine with Trump, and people who are received even at MAGA rallies, who hate Jews because they are Jews. You know, we ask today, we believe in universal values. Today we ask for the world to judge Israel, not based on what Europeans has done to the Jews during World War II. I ask to judge Israel and treat Israel for what they are doing today, their crimes against Palestinians now, currently in Gaza and in the occupied territory. You tweeted something that was so important about Gershon, who was a former negotiator to the Israeli negotiator for the hostages.
Gershon Baskin.
He tweeted something. Gershon Baskin. And he tweeted something that is so relevant and important. Everybody needs to read that Israel lost the war. They crossed every moral, political, and legal line. They destroyed the lives of millions of people in Gaza. Will Israel really be safe? Will anti-Semitism will be fought by killing hundreds of thousands, if not more, of Palestinians? I always remember the founder of the University of Jerusalem, Judas Magnus, who said, you cannot build your happiness and a homeland on the graveyard, on the mass graves of Palestinian women and children and civilians. He said that in the 30s. You cannot build a home for yourself and our people on basically the tragedy of another nation.
And yet we do have a graveyard in Gaza, which keeps getting filled up, despite the ICJ ruling on Friday saying Gaza is occupied territory. Over the weekend, on Monday, we had more Israeli attacks on so-called safe zones, killing innocent civilians, the occupier against the occupied, per the ICJ. Has the world just forgotten about this ongoing war crime in Gaza? Has everyone just become numb to it and moved on?
Well, they can move on. The reality that the Middle East today, more than ever, is a zone of desperation, of radicalization, of extremism, because what you did in Gaza, you obliterated the idea that through negotiation and peace deal, by acknowledging the humanity of Palestinians and addressing the Palestinian issue politically, non-military, you unleashed a virus. And it's not only the polio virus that is now basically killing children in Gaza, but it's another virus that only violence is the only language that the West can understand and can hear. And this is a dangerous precedent and dangerous message, because it took the Iraqis maybe a couple of years before they welcomed more extremists than Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other groups. I fear that our future, especially in that part of the world, is basically, once you undermine international law, you open the door to hell. what kind of future are we seeing for Israelis and Palestinians, for Middle Eastern, if you wreck international humanitarian law? The future you will see is a future where extremists, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and jihadists, and also extremists like Ben Gvir and Smucher and others, will kill each other, and they rather die and kill each other, homicide, suicide, than cut a deal.
Rula, on the subject of us possibly moving on or becoming numb, the rest of the world, how is it that in the midst of this carnage, opening the gates of hell, as you put it, the Prime Minister of the country that's accused of committing a genocide, the Prime Minister who the ICC Chief Prosecutor has requested an arrest warrant for, will be addressing Congress here in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday? And while the Vice President Kamala Harris, who is now the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, won't be at the congressional speech, she'll still be meeting with him in private.
Well, look, she's not going to be sitting next to him and applauding, which is a big deal and a pivot from others, but it's a low bar.
Yes.
Kamala Harris, and I've been actually trying to reach out to her team for a long time, since May last year, trying to explain that we need to pivot from this unconditional support, which is in defiance, in violation of America's Leahy law and international law. She is running on the fact of being prosecutor, yes, of an official of law and order, of the women who stand for legality. You cannot stand for legality and give a pass to a war criminal. You cannot claim that you're defending international humanitarian law and rule-based international order, and then ignore what Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, and Smotrich, the crimes they are committing, and stand accused of committing before the highest courts in the world, the ICC and the ICJ. One of the two things. You cannot be saying that, oh, Israel has the exception and exceptionalize Israel, and then attack Trump and say, well, he doesn't believe in international legality. Well, either you share his values and his talking points about Israel legality and exceptionalism, or you don't. And if you want to win voters, progressive young voters, activists, you have to pivot from Biden failed policy. And I am sorry to say it, I think Netanyahu meddled way too much in American policy. The Obama nuclear deal, the Iraq war, which was a catastrophe for America. And again, he is pro-Trump and pro-Putin, as we saw in billboard all across Israel during the election campaign. If you don't want to be on that side, you have to come out very clearly, not pro-Palestinian or advocating for Palestinian, advocating for international law and international legality. That's what will make a huge difference.
Well said. I just want to turn attention to a country where you are a citizen also. I know you're a citizen of Israel. You're also a citizen of Italy. The far-right Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni recently sued a journalist, Rula, for making fun of her height. And Meloni won in court. The journalist was fined. So much for free speech in Europe. Meloni, who you debated with, I think, back in 2016, well before she was Prime Minister on Italian television, she's now suing you for defamation over a tweet that you posted about her anti-immigration rhetoric. How worried are you that the courts in Europe are cracking down on free speech and that fascists are weaponizing defamation laws to go after their political and media opponents?
I am very worried, Mehdi. I'm very worried because the first thing any fascist government, any fascist regime does is to try to silence critics. We know this because we recently celebrated the life of Matteotti. Giacomo Matteotti was the first opposition leader killed by Mussolini. He bragged about his killing. But before he killed him physically and sent thugs to kill him physically, he tried to kill his personality and character assassination. And we're seeing how judges that are willing to basically condemn journalists and critics. They condemned Saviano, a journalist and a writer who basically said that, who used, a word I would not use. He basically said Meloni is a bastard. That's a quote he used. He was condemned to pay Meloni €1,000. She's attacking the media. She's unleashing fascist thugs, not personally, but obviously they're emboldened by her rhetoric and her presence in power. Yesterday, they attacked a journalist of the main newspaper, La Stampa, and they brutalized him. They beat him in the streets. Meloni condemned the violence, but she never condemned the fascist group Casa Pound, who brutalize and beat the journalists. I fear for our lives. I fear for the lives of my colleagues in Italy. And I fear truly that the media in this moment is so intimidated, they're unwilling to stand up for the truth. And the judiciary, sadly, is a reflection of this climate of intimidation and oppression.
Rula, are you disappointed to see Maloney being, hailed or treated as a moderate, conservative, pro-Western leader by Western liberal leaders like Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau? Is this one big trick, one big performance on her part for the EU, for NATO?
Yes, she's been very good at showing two faces. The face that is pro-Ukraine, which is I applaud, but it's they forgot that in 2019 she defended Putin when he was slaughtering Syrians, said that he's defending Christian values. She actually defended the annexation of Crimea and lobbied to lift the sanctions against Russia on multiple occasions. This is all well documented. But then she came to power and she decided she cannot implement her fascist domestic agenda if the world is criticizing her. So she decided to play a double game. Give the world what they wanted when it comes to Ukraine, but then she understood they will stop criticizing her if she does that. But if you want to see the real face of Giorgia Meloni, look no further than what she's doing to critics, journalists, the opposition, to the national television, who is, when you look at Italian national television and state television, it reminds me of what I used to watch during my years in the Middle East, watching Mubarak's television, the Egyptian, regime television. It's the same exact thing. Look no further what she's doing to academia and to the opposition. They're describing her media and her pundits and also her opposition, describing the opposition as the enemy. And basically, they are beating them up in parliament. We've seen the opposition being beaten up, brutalized, and attacked in parliament by members of Meloni's coalition.
Rula, last question. You spent much of your early life getting attacked by the far right in Israel, and now you're getting attacked by the far right in Italy. How do you deal with all the abuse, the threats, the attacks?
Mehdi, we're blessed and lucky, you and I. We've seen so much that we have a voice. We have a voice. I will not let the fear determine what I'm doing or how I conduct my life. We've seen our colleagues, Shireen Abu Akleh, we've seen our colleagues killed, whether it's in the occupied territories. I always remember also other opposition leaders in the Middle East and across the world who have been killed. We are alive and we have a voice and we have a duty and a responsibility to use this voice. Does that mean that we will be threatened and attacked and bullied? Yes, we will be. That's the price we have to pay. But we have no choice but to speak for the living and the dead.
Well said. Rula Jebreal, stay safe. We stand with you and we appreciate all of your contributions. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.